My name is Richard Coleman. I am 67 years old and I live in Greenville, South Carolina. I never thought I would tell this story. In fact, I never thought I would come back to tell it. It was a normal Sunday. I was home alone, as I usually am. Since my wife passed away 4 years ago, the days have become long and the nights sleepless. My children live far away. Visits have become text messages and hugs have become memories. That morning I made coffee, sat in my favorite chair and turned on the TV. I just wanted some noise around me, but something inside me felt off. A quiet anguish, a weight on my chest that wasn't physical. It was something I'd carried for decades, a silent, secret, ashamed guilt. And that day, it felt heavier than ever. Around 10:30, I went to the bathroom. When I looked in the mirror, my eyes were sunken. I felt slightly dizzy and rested my hands on the sink. The world became blurry. The sound was muffled. I fell to the floor and everything went black. I thought I was fainting, but I wasn't. I was dying. The sensation was like floating, as if my body had been left behind. And it was. I saw my own body lying on the bathroom floor. I was above it, confused, cold, but curious. No pain, no fear. That's when I heard the sound of the ambulance in the distance. My neighbors must have called for help. I saw the paramedics coming in, running, trying to revive me. Shocks, adrenaline, screams. But I was already somewhere else. And that's where the most unbelievable part of it all began. If you are listening to this now, it is because somehow this story reached you. And if it did, maybe it is because you also need to hear what I heard from the other side. If this story touched something inside you, leave a like and subscribe. There's still a lot you need to know. And I need to tell you. When I realized that my body was on the ground and I was no longer inside it, the first sensation was absolute silence. Not that ordinary silence. It was as if time had stopped. There was no pain. There was no fear. There was only presence. I floated gently above the bathroom, then across the living room, as if an invisible current was carrying me. I watched my body being placed on the stretcher. I saw the desperation in the eyes of one of the paramedics, a young man, perhaps my grandson's age. He looked as if he didn't want to give up, but I was no longer part of that world. Little by little, the environment around me began to dissolve, as if it were being erased with an eraser. And then absolute emptiness, total darkness, but not a frightening darkness. It was like being inside a cosmic womb, calm, silent, almost welcoming. It was then that a point of light appeared, distant, but intensely alive. It pulsed. It attracted me. I began to move toward that light, or maybe it was moving toward me. I wasn't walking. I wasn't flying. I just was taken, and the closer I got, the more memories came flooding back. Moments from my childhood, my first kiss, the birth of my children, the death of my wife. But they weren't just memories. They were complete sensations. I felt everything again, as if I were reliving it. Suddenly the light turned into a tunnel, but not like the ones we see in movies. It was more organic, alive, as if it had a consciousness of its own. And as I passed through, voices appeared, some sweet, some sorrowful. Some seemed to be calling my name. Richard. It was as if something, or someone, was waiting for me on the other side. And then I felt it. A presence, so strong, so intense, that everything around me disappeared. It wasn't fear. It was reverence. It was as if my spiritual heart was naked before something infinitely greater. I knew deep in my soul I was about to meet Jesus, but not as I had imagined all my life. Not the Jesus of the paintings, not the Jesus of the churches. It was the real Jesus, and what he would show me I could never have imagined. I was floating in that tunnel, surrounded by a light that wasn't just light, it was consciousness. It was as if every particle there knew who I was. It loved me, and at the same time it stripped me bare. The feeling was paradoxical. I was at peace, but deeply confronted. There was no time there. There was no space. There was only truth, and it enveloped me like a cloak impossible to ignore. As I walked along that living path, images began to emerge. Not on screens, not in words. They were experiences. Each scene from my life came with a precise emotional charge. I didn't just see, I felt again everything I lived. And these weren't the big moments. It wasn't my wedding, the birth of my children, or the death of my wife. No, these were the lonely moments. The late nights when Instead of seeking solace in prayer or in someone, I would sink into a silent, old addiction. Masturbation appeared there, naked, raw, explicit, but not as a condemnation. It was a mirror, not a punishment. I saw myself at 13, discovering the hidden pleasure in the bathroom. The innocent curiosity mixed with the fear of doing something wrong. Then at 20, already married but still stuck in the habit. The shame, the mental excuses, the promise to stop, then just this one more time. Later, at 45, when the frustrations of the marriage became a wall, and I, instead of seeking reconciliation or dialogue, sought refuge in a screen. And then, the same emptiness, the same guilt. The light around me seemed to react to my emotions. When I accepted what I saw, it expanded. When I tried to resist it, it narrowed. That's when the light changed color, from white to gold, and a presence appeared. I didn't need anyone to tell me who it was. I knew. Jesus. He did not appear as a radiant being floating in glory. He appeared with simplicity and power, clear robes, eyes that seemed to contain the universe, and a silence that spoke louder than any sermon I have ever heard. He looked at me, and in that look I felt everything, absolute love, and a truth that spared no one. Without moving his lips, he said, "You have carried this burden for too long, Richard." I cried, but it was a cry that came from places I didn't even know existed inside me. It was as if my soul was crying. You were looking for relief, but you were moving away from what you needed most, me. Each word was like a ray of light piercing through all my masks. And in that moment, I understood something I never forgot. The problem was never pleasure. The problem was the loneliness I never wanted to face, and Jesus did not accuse me. He revealed it to me as someone who, even knowing the worst of me, chose to stay. He stood before me, and there was no mistaking it. It was Jesus, but not the Jesus I had been taught to imagine. He was not the frail man in the stained glass windows. He was not the distant symbol that only appears at Sunday services. He was real, more real than anything I had ever experienced. His presence filled the air, permeated my being, as if every particle of my spirit were being rearranged by him. I couldn't speak, not out of fear, but out of reverence. It was like standing before the origin of everything, and yet I felt something that completely disarmed me. He knew me, all of me, and yet he loved me. Jesus looked at me deeply, and without moving his lips, he spoke directly to my heart. You were never alone, but you got used to living as if you were. Tears welled up, not from the eyes of my body, which were no longer mine at that moment, but from my soul. It was as if a dam was breaking inside. Years, decades of silence, of stifled prayers, of swallowed screams were coming to the surface. He held out his hand to me, and immediately we found ourselves in another place, a kind of field, not physical, but emotional. And there, in the light, the scenes of my life were projected around us. He showed me the times when I chose isolation, the nights when, faced with pain, frustration, and loneliness, I turned to masturbation for solace. I found myself curled up, desperate for something to make me forget. And Jesus, with a calm but firm voice, said, "Richard, you sought solace where there was only an echo." The words fell over me like a blanket of reality. For the first time, I realized that what I thought was private pleasure, it was actually an emotional hiding place. A dark hole where I let parts of myself fester without realizing it. He showed me more. He showed me how many times I stopped talking to my wife, opening up to my children, seeking help, because it was easier to close myself off and repeat the cycle of loneliness dressed up as pleasure. And then Jesus touched my chest, not my physical body, but the center of my being. And in that touch, I felt everything. Not only the pain I had caused myself, but the little wounds I had left in others by always being emotionally absent. You are not to blame for what you suffered, but you are responsible for what you choose to ignore. I fell to my knees before him in spirit, not out of compulsion, but out of gratitude. For the first time in my entire existence, I felt that someone saw everything, absolutely everything in me, and yet did not reject me. He lifted me up with a gesture, and with his eyes fixed on mine, he said something that echoes to this day. "I didn't come to condemn you, Richard. I came to wake you up." And at that moment, something began to change inside me. A deep understanding that the real hell was not fire and brimstone. It was living apart from yourself and from God. The light around us began to change. It was no longer a field. It was as if we were inside my own consciousness. Every hidden thought, every silent intention, every habit I had told myself was no big deal. It was there. Jesus led me to a kind of mirror, but it wasn't made of glass. It was made of unresolved experiences, and what I saw there was the reflection of my soul. I saw myself as a teenager, hiding in the basement of my parents' house, escaping the world in magazines my uncle had left behind. I remembered the fear, the pleasure, the shame, and how this became a silent refuge for pains that didn't even have a name. Jesus never looked away. He watched everything with me, not as a judge, but as someone who was always there, even when I thought I was alone. You sought control, Richard, but that practice has always controlled you. I wanted to argue, I wanted to justify, to say that it was something natural, human, common, that no one had been directly hurt. But the images spoke louder. I saw my wife on nights when she waited for me, and I pretended to be tired. I saw my children trying to talk, while my mind was clouded with guilt. I saw how many opportunities for true connection I had missed out on, for the sake of a momentary, solitary pleasure. And then Jesus showed me something that knocked me off my feet. The invisible consequences. It showed how that practice, repeated in silence, had affected my perception of affection, my intimacy, my ability to be present. How each relief built a wall, not a visible one, but an emotional one. A wall that isolated me, not only from others, but from myself and from God. The problem is not what you did with the body, Richard. It's what you forgot to do with your heart. Those words still resonate with me to this day. And if you're here listening to me, maybe there's something inside you that needs to be seen with truth too. Maybe there's a mirror in your story, and parts that you avoid looking at, for fear of what you might find. If any part of this story resonated with you, if it awakened deep memories or feelings, share it in the comments. Maybe what you write there is not just a rant. Maybe it is the beginning of your own liberation. Jesus looked at me once more, and there, in that light that did not judge but revealed, I understood. Masturbation was not the problem. It was the symptom, and the real poison was silence. After the revelation, I thought everything had been revealed. But Jesus took me even deeper. The scene around us changed. Now we were in a room with no walls, no ceiling, no floor. It was a kind of spiritual dimension, but it seemed to be made of condensed emotions. In the center of this room, a large mirror appeared. But it did not reflect my appearance, it reflected my essence. It was as if all the layers of my soul, thoughts, fears, traumas, addictions, desires, wounds, were there, one on top of the other, pulsating in light and shadow. Jesus stood beside me. This is you inside. I looked, and I saw. I saw a rejected boy, my father yelling at me when I was 8 years old because I cried too much after falling off my bike. I shut up after that. I learned to swallow it all. I saw my adolescence full of doubts, with no one to talk to about sexuality, fear, spirituality. I learned to deal with everything in silence, and there was the pattern: swallow, hide, run, repeat. I saw the first time I cried alone in the bathroom after masturbating and promising never to do it again. The promise was broken the next day. I saw the pain of living in contradiction, truly loving God, but feeling unworthy of Him. I didn't need to say anything. Jesus knew everything, and He showed me not to destroy me, but so I could see, for real, for the first time. You have created a character for the world, Richard, a man of faith, integrity, correctness. But here there is only the truth, and it needs to be seen, not denied. I cried, but it was a different kind of crying. It wasn't guilt, it was liberation, as if by looking into my soul without masks, I could finally begin to exist in a whole way. And Jesus showed me something else. Every shame-based choice created a shadow, and those shadows shaped the way I saw myself, the way I related, and even the way I saw God. I understood with piercing clarity that sin was never just the act. The greatest sin was hiding from myself, and then in the mirror I saw something that took my breath away, the version of myself that God dreamed up. It was me, whole, healed, transparent, without shame, without vices, without masks. And the most unbelievable thing, Jesus looked at that version with the same love with which He looked at me now. It was there that I understood. God never expected me to be perfect to love me. He just hoped I would have the courage to look at myself truthfully. And then let him rebuild what I spent my life hiding. After staring at my soul in the mirror, I thought I had already been completely exposed. But Jesus wasn't done yet. He touched my shoulder, and the room changed again. Everything went dark, like an old, dusty room. There were drawers, boxes, closed doors. These are the places you never let anyone in. I recognized that space. It was the basement of my own history, where I filed away memories, phrases, and wounds that I had avoided for a lifetime. Jesus led me to a small drawer. When I opened it, a scene took over the place. Me, 5 years old, sitting on the floor of my room, alone, crying because my mother had left me at an unknown aunt's house for days. That boy felt abandoned, and no one listened to him. Then another scene. Me, 11, listening to my father say to a friend in the backyard, "That kid will never be a real man, he's too soft." That night I promised myself that I would never cry in front of anyone again. Another door opened. I was 18, on a church retreat. I felt like confessing my addiction to a pastor, but I was overcome with shame, fear of being exposed, fear of losing respect. I kept quiet, and I went back to seeking comfort in the dark. Jesus looked at me and said, "These voices shaped you more than the truth." And at that moment I realized something brutal. Masturbation, for me, has always been a cold hug, a substitute, a temporary relief for a boy who just wanted to be heard, welcomed, accepted. And how many of us, men and women, don't live like this, carrying old voices inside the head, voices that say, "You are not enough, you are dirty, you will never change." Jesus then knelt before that 5-year-old boy, my past self, and embraced him. And when he did that, something happened inside me. A crack, a release, a light. For the first time, I felt like that inner child had been seen. You didn't need to punish yourself, Richard. You just needed to be healed. This was one of the most intense moments of my entire journey. And maybe you're also hearing voices inside yourself that no one else hears. Maybe you still carry a weight that isn't yours. Maybe, like me, you just need to be seen. Really. After that hug that Jesus gave to the boy that I was, that forgotten, rejected, alone Richard, something inside me broke and at the same time reorganized itself. I felt lighter, but also more vulnerable, as if everything was coming to the surface with no more layers to hide. Jesus looked at me tenderly, but with a loving seriousness that went right through me. "You need to understand what true judgment is, Richard." I feared those words. All my life I had been taught to fear God's judgment. The images of hell, of eternal punishment, of sins recorded in a book, they haunted me for decades. But in that instant, the environment around us changed. We were in a space that seemed to have no end or beginning, a kind of spiritual court. But there was no throne, there were no accusations. There was only absolute truth and absolute love, together in the same place. Jesus led me to the center of this space. All around me, images of my choices appeared. But now, not only the visible acts, also the thoughts, the omissions, the intentions that I had hidden even from myself. Every time I ignored my wife out of pride, every time I pretended to be okay, just so I wouldn't have to deal with my emotions, each time I turned to masturbation as an escape, and then hid even from God. And then, the most painful scene, a Sunday afternoon, my wife in the kitchen trying to talk, clearly sad. Me with my face buried in the newspaper, mumbling dry answers, wishing she would just stop. Jesus paused the scene. That choice, that silence, that emotional distancing, did more harm than any physical act. I cried, because there I realized, God's judgment is not made of harsh words. It is made of clear revelation. And before the clear truth, the soul trembles. But Jesus didn't leave me on the ground. You think I came to condemn you? The real judgment is this. Light came into the world and you chose what to do with it. He showed me that every time I gave in to shame, isolation, secret addiction, I wasn't just making mistakes. I was rejecting the light. And the worst prison was not the sin itself, was to live without allowing God to free me from it. Jesus looked at me with eyes filled with compassion and said, "Richard, hell begins when you believe you are too alone to be saved." It tore at my soul, because it was exactly how I had felt for years. Even going to church, even praying, even reading the Bible. Deep down, I believed that God supported me, but He didn't really hug me. And then, He reached out, once more. The trial is happening now, Richard, and it's made up of a simple question. Do you want to keep running, or do you want to go back home? At that moment, I understood. True love does not judge us to punish us. He judges us to set us free. After the trial of love, I felt as if I were being reborn, not physically, but in perception. Something inside me had changed. I understood now that my entire life was not just a sequence of decisions. It was a journey between light and shadow, between courage and escape. But Jesus was not finished yet. He led me down a narrow path. There were no more colors around us. The soft light was replaced by a dense, thick, living darkness. The air was heavy, as if human emotions themselves formed that atmosphere. I want to show you what happens when someone loses themselves completely. That's when I saw them. They were shadows, not bodies, not ghosts, souls, trapped, shrunken. Some moved in circles, repeating automatic gestures, as if they were living a scene forever. Others were kneeling, muttering words that no one could hear. They all had something in common. They didn't know they were dead. Jesus explained to me, these souls were not condemned by me. They condemned themselves by refusing to see the truth. They preferred the comfort of lies to the pain of transformation. I recognized some behaviors in those shadows. Men trapped in pleasure without soul, power without compassion, control without love. Women who lost themselves in appearances, in inherited guilt, in abuses they never faced. Human beings who, like me, started hiding in small acts and never came back. I saw one soul in particular. It was bent over, repeating the same gesture, hiding something under its clothes. It was as if it was trying to hide a secret until then, in the afterlife. Jesus looked at me steadily. This was a man who spent his entire life masturbating to forget who he was. And now he doesn't remember anymore. He got lost in the cycle. That got to me. It was like I was looking at an extreme version of what could have been me if I had kept denying, pretending, hiding. These souls don't need to stay here. Jesus added, but they can only leave when they accept seeing. And then I understood. Hell is not an imposed punishment. It is a state of deep denial. It is to live or die, without ever allowing yourself to be transformed by the truth. At that moment, Jesus stretched out his arm, and in one brief gesture, he made everything disappear. We returned to the silent golden field where it all began. I was in shock, but also awake. Jesus looked at me tenderly as if to say, now you see, now you know. And then he asked the question that changed everything. Do you want to go back? The question hung in the air like a silent storm. Do you want to go back? Jesus looked at me with infinite patience, but there was something different now, a weight between the lines, as if what was at stake was greater than I could comprehend. For an instant, my soul was divided. Part of me wanted to stay, there on that plane where there was no pain, no guilt, no loneliness. But another part felt like I wasn't done yet, that there was something out there, in the physical world, that I needed to do, say, live, restore. Why would I go back? I asked in my mind, and Jesus answered me without words, as if he already knew the question before I even thought it. Because there are people waiting for you, even if they don't know it. At that moment, I saw faces. My children, now adults but still carrying wounds we never talk about. My grandson, growing up without strong emotional references. Friends who also live in silence, trapped in addictions, secrets, habits that they call normal, but that hide stifled screams. I saw people I had never met, but who one day might hear my story, and because of it, wake up too. Jesus continued, you were broken, but now you understand why. You don't come back as the same man. Come back as someone who saw, and therefore can guide. I took a deep breath, or rather, my soul breathed. The fear was still there, but along with it, something new was born. Courage, mission, clarity. What if I fail again? I asked, my heart sinking. Jesus smiled with such intense compassion that it broke me apart. You will fail, but now you know who's waiting for you. When you fall, these words gave me strength. And then he came closer. He touched my forehead with 2 fingers. And in that instant, a warmth washed over me. A kind of energy that wasn't physical, it was a spiritual summons. Everything started to fade away. The light became shadow, peace mixed with a soft hum, and I felt a sudden pain, like a shove. I was coming back. But before disappearing from that plane, I heard his voice one last time. Tell me everything. Don't hide anything. The truth that saved you can save others. The world returned with violence. The first sensation was weight. Weight of the body, weight of time, weight of the world. Sounds, noises, machines beeping, hurried voices, lights too white. I was in the hospital. The sound of the heart machine pulsed steadily, rhythmically. My eyes opened with difficulty, but they were open. I was breathing, my heart was beating, I was back. I felt tears welling up in the corners of my eyes before I even realized where exactly I was. It was as if my spirit was still adjusting to my body, as if my soul, having expanded too much, was trying to fit back into my fragile flesh. A nurse noticed me and urgently called others. Within seconds, doctors surrounded my bed. They asked me what I remembered, how I felt, if I knew where I was. I just shook my head, trying to piece together the physical world with what I had just experienced in the spiritual plane. But one certainty screamed inside me. Louder than any heartbeat, I needed to tell. When my children arrived, their eyes were red. The doctor had already prepared them for the worst. They hugged me tightly. But when I looked at them, I no longer saw them with the same eyes. I saw their souls, their silent pain, their unanswered questions. And for the first time in many years, I cried in front of them. Not from sadness, not from pain, from redemption. They asked me what happened. I tried to explain this, but there were no words. Not yet. In the following days, while I was recovering, I began to write. Pages and more pages. I couldn't sleep properly, or watch TV, or talk about trivial things, because inside me something screamed, "Tell everything, don't hide anything." I wrote about pain, about addiction, about shame. I wrote about what Jesus showed me, about the judgment of love, about forgotten souls, about the mirror of the soul, and about the choice that was given to me, and that by grace I had the courage to make. I started recording short videos with my cell phone, speaking softly, with a hoarse voice, but with my heart on fire, and the more I spoke, the lighter I felt. It wasn't about me anymore. It was about every person who lives in hiding, every man who suffers in silence, every soul that thinks it is doomed, when in fact, it is just sleeping. And I understood. My return was not a miracle to save me. It was a wake-up call to others. The video you are watching now was not planned. I didn't write a script. I didn't choose beautiful words. I didn't think about the image, the lighting, or the editing. I only knew one thing. I had to tell. My name is Richard Coleman. I'm 67 years old, and recently, I died. I saw my body on the ground. I saw my soul floating, and I saw Jesus, not as a symbol, but as a real presence. He showed me everything. He showed me the truth that I had hidden my whole life, and that truth set me free. For decades, I was a family man, a churchgoer, a respected man, and inside, I was silently wasting away. Masturbation wasn't just a habit. It was my hiding place, my medicine, my prison. But nobody talked about it. Men of my generation were taught to keep quiet, to endure, to pretend everything was fine. And while we pretended, we got sick, in the soul, in the heart, in the spirit. I saw what happens to those who never wake up. I saw souls stuck in denial, repeating the same cycles even after death. And I saw myself, the way God dreamed me, whole, true, free. Today, I am not completely healed. I am still human. I still have weaknesses, but I'm awake, and that changes everything. Don't hide it anymore. Not of the world, not from God, and most importantly, not from yourself. Jesus did not come to condemn me. He came to show me what I was missing by not living truthfully. And that's why I'm here looking at this camera, with my voice choked and my soul open. This is my confession, and if she touches you, so maybe it wasn't just mine. Maybe God let me come back to remind you that there is still time. It always works. If this story spoke to you in some way, if it awakened something deep inside you, a memory, a forgotten truth, an old pain, then don't let it die here. Subscribe to the channel now, because what comes after this goes even deeper. And if you've made it this far, I want to know. Comment below with the phrase, "There's still time." That's it, no explanations. Whoever writes it will know why, and whoever reads it, maybe it will awaken too. Don't forget to like it, not out of vanity, but because it helps this message reach those who need to hear it most. And now, click on the next video that's appearing on the screen. The next story could be exactly what your soul is asking for right now. Go there. I'll wait for you on the other side of the truth.